Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applaud those models.
Undervalue.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list.
Hi, everyone. This is Brian Morrison, CEO and co-founder of Proxy, the executive multiplier. At Proxy, we apply a chief of staff to an executive to take over and automate those routine tasks, but also provide strategic counsel and drive strategic initiatives. And so each month we take a look at some of those strategic initiatives that are on the chief's checklist. And we highlight one of those so that you can kind of get a glimpse into what other CEOs are focused on. In January, the monthly multiplier is personal reputation management. And you might have seen that we did an interview with Tom Edwards. If you didn't, you should check that out on how to build your digital reputation. Today, we're going to be joined by author Mike Mooney. And Mike has written a book called Reputation Shift. And it's a fantastic piece on how to build your analog brand. So please help me welcome Mike Mooney. And actually, Mike, I mean, you know, we've known each other a long time. We've worked together for a long time. And when we were both in the agency world, you were the kind of pro that I loved. I mean, you knew your stuff, always high integrity, consistent follow through, authenticity. You always have a true empathy for other people. And it was consistent all the time. And that's that analog brand you've got, you know?
Yeah. Well,
it's great.
I'm grateful for that. Thank you, brother. And you know, the feeling is very mutual. I think we always had a great time together, not only in the work created, but also just sort of like challenging each other and thinking differently. And you know, how do you, you know, first and foremost, it was always that desire to serve, you know, always that desire to serve and create first, you know, which I think was always a big differentiator for us.
Yeah, I agree with that. So tell me a little bit about, Mike, was that a methodical, planned process for you to be able to build that type of brand, or were you just raised well? I mean, like,
well,
how'd you develop that brand?
Yeah, if mom and dad are listening, absolutely, it was the upbringing, for sure. But you know, it was something, Brian, that early on in my career, I realized the power, quite honestly, of reputation, of how you show up, the importance of living out your values. The key thing has always been finding those points of consistency. You know?
Yeah, and I talk a little bit about, and by the way, if you guys haven't read this, Reputation Shift, I love this book, you know, because
thanks, man.
In all your years of working in motorsports, I just think it's really interesting how you've managed to identify so many similar metaphors, right, for how do we operate.
So what I've loved since pivoting out of motorsports and now speaking and facilitating and coaching, I wasn't really a motorsports fan, but I totally understand this analogy and how this makes sense. And now you've got me thinking about it in such a different way. It's been really cool to see the acceptance of not only the message, but also like the richness of the experiences and the connections to like you said, to brands, to the development, their reputation, all the things that really encompass what brands should be and need to be today.
And it's interesting, your use of brand is similar to me. I think of brand as being holistic, right? And so it encompasses a lot. And we're talking specifically about personal brand. How do you define that? Because I love the fact that you go, you know, analog first, right? Because that's really where it should start.
That's it. And I say it a lot. You know, people say, well, what do? You talk about reputation and brand. They said, where do you start? I said, always with the analog. You know, because that's where the true litmus test is. I may see something on the digital side, but what do I experience? And that to me is what the brand is. The brand is the promise of an experience. From a reputation standpoint, there are a lot of different definitions, you know, for that, Brian. You can go to the Webster Dictionary, et cetera. My definition is really simple. So your reputation speaks for you when you aren't there to speak for yourself. What's it saying? Do you have any idea what it's saying? And more often than not, Brian, what I've found is that people's approach to reputation, which is why I wrote Reputation Shift, has always been on the reactive side. It's the what now side of things. And my work in motorsports and working with brands like Mercedes-Benz and Tylenol, Walmart, Sprint, AT&T, et cetera, has always been around the what if. How can we be intentional? How can we be proactive? How can we look at reputation as an actual business differentiator and accelerator?
Yeah. And I think if I remember correctly from the book, what I liked is you actually broke down a formula for reputation.
Yeah.
Right? It's values, decisions, behavior, and time. Is that right?
That's it, man. It's about values first and foremost. The values are what ground us, to who we are, what we believe in. So if you take the values of the first part of that, the values then drive our decisions. Our decisions drive our behavior. Our consistent behavior over time is what then becomes the reputation that we've earned. When I step back and I think about that, I think it's a couple things. It's not only like maybe the individual doesn't really care to think about that or how their values actually come alive and play out on a day-to-day basis, right? But I also think back to leadership. I think back to the responsibility of leaders that they too have to be the beacons, right? The waypoints of the values of the company every single day. So again, what are we as organizational leaders living out? And not only our personal values, but how they tie to the organization's values as well. Because we've got people watching us, man. You know that. They're always watching.
Yeah, I agree. You know what's really interesting about that is you made that point about the executives who, put in a pool table and say, now we're fun, or a ping pong table, and we're a company that believes in fun, or we put it up on the wall, excellence, and therefore we have excellence. And so one of the first things we do at Proxy is, as a chief of staff, we look at, do the systems and the processes reinforce the values?
And isn't that the key part of again, that brand experience? I can see something, I can hear something, wonderful. But when I feel it, that becomes like that emotional souvenir. That's that moment in time that transcends, anything else that goes beyond, the business at hand. Now you've got me. Got me.
I love emotional souvenir. That's great. So, Mike, after you go through that process, how do you define the ROI, right? Because I hear that all the time, and we heard that in the advertising world with big brands, and we actually had ways to, it's pretty simple, actually.
Weber Shandwick, who were like leaders in reputation management globally, had a study a while back that also said that more than 50% of a company's reputation is tied to the reputation of the CEO.
Yes.
You can also be looking at things such as, employee retention, employee loyalty. You're looking at your referral rates on business. You're looking at the customers that are staying longer with you. These are some of the things that are a little softer that you have to observe. That if a customer has an issue with you, they stay with you. They work with you. They trust you. Also, the other way you can look at it, quite honestly, is you look at influence. You look at the people that are suddenly being brought into your sphere. It's like, I call it creating gravity, where as your reputation continues to grow, you're building gravity that people want to be part of what you're doing. The one that comes to mind right off the bat is Jimmy Johnson, who was 7-time NASCAR series champion, just retired. I mean, this guy was the model of doing it right. What you see when you interact with him is just a genuine man who is just grateful to be doing what he's doing with the organization it is, and he shows it with the people around him, with the people he interacts with, and what you see online. The challenge with some of these athletes, and not just in racing, but they've got teams of people that work with them to manage and make sure that the image lines up. So I would really gauge that one around the individual experience that I had, because you've experienced this with athletes, and they may look fantastic on digital. And there's always that saying, like, be careful that you don't always meet your hero. You know, because then you meet him in person, you're like, oh my God, what a jerk. There's a strategy that I use in the book and I share in the book. It's called visualizing your instant replay. And that's the beauty of the instant replay, right? It slows things down. It helps you look at it from different perspectives. It could even change your mind of what you really believe to be true in that like split second of a call. Well, my encouragement, my invitation to executives and people is to say, why wouldn't we employ that in our own lives? I mean, it's just things where, we have to, and we have an opportunity to really slow things down before we put things into the social media world that could have immense implications.
Some folks, what about the folks that have been around for a while? They've already built that foundation, but they want to try and improve it, or they want to hone that reputation. Like a lot of times when I talk with executives, they're less interested in how do I put forward a bigger thought leadership position, and more like, I just want to manage risk. I want to manage crisis.
Yeah, I think there's great opportunity in crisis when we identify risk. There was a resource that I put together and from my days in motorsports that I actually had to use when I was running the marketing communications for the Nextel Cup Series several years ago. And we were coming under scrutiny for some things, and there was risk, and I put together this says who. Take a step back and think about the questions that you're being asked, or more importantly, what could be asked. What are the trends happening in your industry that actually could spill over into your organization? There's a halo effect. If you were in the mortgage lending business, then you just had the stink on you, back in the early 2000s, right? You may not have been doing anything wrong, but you just had to stink of it. So,
guilt by association, right?
Well, that's it. That's the halo. That's the halo effect, right? So I would encourage, and I always do, I encourage executives to think about where are the risk points, not just internally, but within your industry as well. Name them. Actually go in and name them. What are they? And then start thinking about, have we addressed it? Is there a gap here? And is there an opportunity? Because if you see a risk and it's addressed, that's great, you're protected. But if you haven't, now there's an opportunity to create something, to create content, to create a process or a system that you can then translate into a competitive differentiator. Go out and be proactive and talk about how you're handling this. So that's what I do. I'll go in and work with the companies to really, as a third party, you can ask those questions, really, let's talk about it, and we'll dig into where are those risk points and where are the gaps. Or if you're currently doing it, well, let's blow it out even more. But how can you tie it back to your business and really then use your reputation to further amplify your organization as well? By coming up with ideas that tie your business to more relatable or personal trends that are happening right now that are important to your customers. Yeah, it is. I had a buddy of mine reach out to me earlier, actually it was late last week, and we were talking about something similar where he was seeing something happening out there right now in this world of Zoom meetings and the pace that we're all running at. And his point was that, we're really starting to burn down the very structure that we need to support us, which are relationships, right? Because we're just running so frenetically and don't have those natural pauses like we had in an office to walk down the hall to, just kind of decompress. And he happens to work for a renewable energy company. So in renewable energy, he's like, I'd love to talk about this, but I can't because it has nothing to do with my business. I said, but actually it does. Relationships are energy. Relationships, do create energy that can be renewable within each other. And what a better message do we need right now of how do you take the power of relationship into renewable energy? And then more importantly, look in your own culture and organization and say, what are the things that we can be doing to mitigate this pace? So to make sure that we are building in the certain pause points or building a relationship. Put that into play. Make it your own case study that when you go out to your customers and speak to them in this way, that you're showing how you're leading, not only externally within renewable energy, but internally with your people. So, it's things like that where you can start looking at the value points of not only the business, as well as the value points of the executive and the individual.
The concept of tying renewable energy into relationships is something really powerful. That's a great example.
And I'm a big believer that it's tough to read the label when you're inside the jar. So having someone who's outside of it to be able to say, but what about this? You can tie renewable energy here, and you can make it part of your customer, loyalty program to see you differently, yet not too different from the core business of what you offer.
Well, right. And that's where you and Proxy come together, right? It's about getting people out of that mundane work that isn't benefiting the company or themselves.
Exactly.
And letting them work above it. So I love it. Mike, this has been fantastic.
Oh man, I've loved it. Thank you.
I love that you sat down and you put those years of experience into a format that everybody else can use.
Thank you.
And I can't imagine anybody better for a coach in this process too. And so thank you for coaching all of us, giving us that input, and we just appreciate your time.
Thank you, man. Feeling is mutual. I love what you're doing out there for businesses and the C-suite. They desperately need it right now, as much as everything's coming at them. People who understand where they're going, more importantly, like what you've been doing with Tony and putting in the right systems and structures in place to actually help these executives be much more productive, and not pulling their hair out. So
appreciate
kudos
that.
to you, man. Yeah.
Thank you. Less talk and more do, right?
That's it. Absolutely.
All right, man. Thanks again. We appreciate your time.
Cheers. Thank you.
Man, you got to love Mike Mooney. So much valuable information there. Some of the things that stood out to me about building your brand and that foundation and how Mike looks at it that I thought was valuable are the formula of a reputation, thinking about values with decisions, with behaviors, and time being the variables that add up to your reputation. And when we talked about values, I think that was also a really interesting part of the discussion when he was saying it's not say versus do, it's not the company versus you, it's and. How do you find those intersecting points that allow you to build the company and your own personal brand at the same time? Visualizing that instant replay, using risk and crisis as a positive, starting to document those and prepare, all of that invaluable. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Got to go, got to get back to the leaders list.